Welcome to the N1IR Electronics blog. I'm your host, Chris Johnson, N1IR, and today we're going to make up one of these things. This is a cigarette plug to Anderson Power Pole connector. I've been asked a lot about the Anderson Power Poles and how to assemble them, so I figured this video would show a couple things on how to crimp some connections and install power pole connections. Now, a little bit about the Anderson Power Pole connections. There is a proper standard for this. This is the Aries Races group. Defines as the Anderson Power Pole as red on this side. So if you look at the little A, let me see if I can zoom in on that a little bit. There's a little A stamped on this. So if it's facing like this, there's a little saying, right is red. So you just keep the right side red as you're looking at it. A little kind of thing that I memorized. So when the A is facing you, right is red. So let's get started. So for the cigarette plug, I use these MCM lighter plugs. It's a 27-110. They're about 60 cents a piece, so they're pretty inexpensive. This one does not have the fuse in it, so whatever equipment that you have plugged in here, you have to have a fuse. I'm plugging this into a set of Yaesu FT1900s that already have the fuse built into the power cord, so that's not a problem in this case. So they do have a fused version as well, if you want a fused version of the cigarette plug, but I chose not to. These are pretty neat, these little cigarette plugs. I've actually put circuitry in these in the past. I've used a regulator in there to bump it down to 5 volts from 12 volts. So it's got a lot of space in there. It's a good little hobby plug to use. And let me open it up real quick. So, you know, I'd order like, you know, a couple dozen of these and have them in your shack because they're pretty useful. And let's open it up real quick. And this is a quick connector that goes in here. And let me show you that real quick. Oh, there goes the spring. So, you got the spring in there and then you got the tip. And that goes in like that. So they come with these connectors here, as you can see, and what they do is, you know, you crimp them on and solder them, and you push them, and they make contact in there like that. So what I've done in the past, and you know, I've actually could fit circuitry in here and do all sorts of stuff. So it's a nice little plug to have, you know, as a hobbyist. There's plenty of room to put, you know, other electronics in there and LEDs and stuff like that. So, you know, for 60 cents, you can't beat it. So that's how these things work, is that you typically install the wire and you push these guys straight in, which I'm going to show you in a couple of minutes. So that is how this plug works. And it's a pretty rugged connector. And of course it's inexpensive, you know. Okay, so that's the whole thing there. And I've actually put these on a PC board as well and soldered some copper on it and had a PC board extend out here and do all sorts of stuff with voltage regulators and stuff like that. So, yeah, that's a nice little project you can do. But anyways, let's get back to our Anderson Power Pole converter from this. So what you're going to need is, of course, is the cigarette plug. You don't have to use the same exact one I am, but you're also going to need an Anderson Power Pole and the connectors. On the connectors, this is actually a 30 amp version connector. I'd recommend getting the 30s instead of just the 15s. You know, you can always fit a 30 onto a 15 and vice versa. And the nice thing about the Anderson Power Poles is that they're genderless, so it doesn't matter what side you have, unlike the Molex plugs that we used to use years ago. Ooh, my battery indicator's flashing a little bit, so hopefully I won't die. But it's genderless, so you can plug in anything. You just got to be sure of the polarity. And you can do the right is red routine there. Okay, so let's get started. So we have a piece of 14 gauge wire. And we're going to cut this back about a ½ inch. And I'm going to cut that because I got a little bit of the copper in there. So you want to get right down the middle. And this is automotive grade 12 gauge, 14 gauge wire. I either use 14 or 12 depending on how much current I use. Now I strip off about a 1/2 inch. And when I install these connectors for the cigarette plug, I install them just like that. You got a little bit of copper right here up to the end, and you want it facing each other like that. So when you plug it in, it just slides right in. You don't have to twist these around. So you always want to solder a connector how it's going to live in the final product. That way you're not stressing the wire or breaking any solder connections or anything like that. Another thing I like to do is solder these connections. Any type of mobile application I like to solder. It's a little bit more extra time, but in the long run it's going to free you up from any problems. I don't know how many times I've seen just crimp connectors used in automotive applications and they fail. I see it a lot. Versus a soldered connection, which I typically don't see fail. I haven't seen one fail yet. I've done tons of audio work and stuff like that over the years, so I'm just using just a regular needle nose because I don't have the right crimper for this. They do have a special crimper. I suggest buying it. That's the nice thing about crimpers. They're pretty inexpensive and they make the work a lot easier than trying to do it this way. But unfortunately, I don't have that. So this is what they should look like. Just in like that. So I'm going to solder up these and then we're going to insert it. You can see there's a positive and negative symbol. So that's one end of the cable. I also like to put a little bit of heat shrink over, just like here, makes it a little bit more professional looking on both sides. And for the Anderson power poles, how I crimp these guys is, again, I strip down about a 1/2 inch. You can use an X-Acto knife, that works well. And you can see the right is red. So when you put these in, you want these little clips facing up. So when they clip in, it clips up. So when I strip this, again, I strip about a 1/2 inch. You want to make them even. If I strip a little bit too much, I can always come back and cut it down a little bit. And it's all experience and feel and how these connectors go together. So, you know, do a lot of practice. So this is the way you want it, like that. See the little curl facing up. So I'm going to take my crimpers. I'd recommend getting a set of Anderson crimpers, not the cheapo ones that look like needle nose. Those have those, and those don't work as well. So I'm going to put this guy in. It's kind of hard to do this with the camera in there, and I just come down just enough. And this is a ratcheting crimper, so it's going to ratchet it completely before it releases. All my crimpers that I have are ratcheting type, so it does one complete crimp before it releases, so I can't halfway squeeze it and that's it. So when you do get crimpers, I get the ratcheting type. That way you know there's a good connection. So I'm gonna push that in like that. So that's one side. And again, I'm gonna solder this. I'm gonna do that in my next videos that you're gonna see. I'll try to limit my videos down to about 10 minutes because of the upload time. And I'm gonna crimp this guy, the negative side. And there we go. So I'm going to pause the video at this point, and we're going to solder these and assemble them. And you can see the little curl going up, it's going to go right in like that and push in. When you push it in, I'd recommend using a small screwdriver or a jeweler screwdriver to make sure it gets set home. You can hear an actual click when you push these in. It's a nice solid click, so if it's not in all the way, you might not hear that click, and then you just take a little jeweler screwdriver, push it in a little bit more, and you should hear it click. So I'm going to stop the video at this point, recharge my battery, and get back to soldering and heat shrinking this piece.